Welcome to FO Live with me, Claire Price, to make sense of India's unicorns, not mythical creatures, but very real companies valued at $1 billion or more. India is now home to over 80 unicorn startups, including insurance marketplace PB Fintech, digital payments platform Paytm, food delivery business Zomato, and fashion e-commerce platform Nykaa. 10 years ago, the story was very different. Between 2011 and 2014, India produced just one unicorn a year. But last year that soared to 43, taking the total number to 81. So to make sense of what's happening for us, we have an incredible panel. First up, we have Asha Jadeja, who's a venture capitalist and philanthropist based in Silicon Valley, who's invested in over 200 tech startups. We've also got Yashish Dahiya, who's chairman and CEO of PB Fintech, one of India's newest unicorns, and Amit Singh, who's partner at law firm Linklaters, where he's head of South and Southeast Asia capital markets. FO Live is brought to you by Fair Observer, a platform for citizen journalism, which has over 2,500 contributors from over 90 different countries. And we would love you to join the conversation. So please do sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, and of course, you can publish with us. First up, Asha, if we can start with you. We understand, obviously, that you are one of the founding investors in Twitter and Google, so you know more than most about unicorns. Can you tell us why it's been India's year of the unicorn? Can you explain what we're seeing?
So it's actually, I think, well, first of all, it's a mystery as to why the inflection point has happened so suddenly. Nobody really seems to have that answer, because it's literally in the last 6 months that there has been this hockey stick growth in the startup world. But that said, I think it's a combination of factors. One is, of course, a bunch of expat Indians coming back to India from US, especially from Silicon Valley, and establishing their presence in Bangalore, investing here in Bangalore as angels, bringing back that knowledge of their own startup experience in the US back to the Indian ecosystem. Second thing is also an expansion of the large tech giants like Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, and Amazon into India. And I think as that expansion happens, you will see spin-off of a lot of talent from within these companies that are going out and creating solutions for the local markets. Then the third factor is companies like Flipkart, which have exits, and a lot of liquidity in the founding pool of people. We are seeing an explosion of angel investors coming from companies like Flipkart, which have exited. So a combination of those 3 or 4 things, I think, is what is creating this hockey stick growth in the unicorns. I also think that next year in 2022, we'll see an unprecedented listing of public markets of Indian unicorns, not just in the Indian stock market, but on NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange. We'll see a lot of that in 2022. So I think those are probably the factors as to why it's going through the roof right now. And I think it's going to continue unabated now for the next, foreseeable future.
Just as a quick follow-up question, Asha, is this a good thing or is this a bubble that could burst? What's your opinion on that?
No, it's a solid growth right now, because a lot of the companies that are becoming unicorns are SaaS companies, which is software as a service companies. And these companies, their valuations are based on revenues and on profitability. So it's pretty solid, robust growth in revenues that is creating this unicorn environment. I think this is not like the good old days when companies were simply in the e-commerce space. This is much more solid enterprise companies, and so they are also being valued based on the revenues that they make. So no, this is not a bubble. This is likely to continue for, as I said, for longer than a decade now.
Okay, Asha, thank you very much. Yashish, if we can bring you in next. You obviously are the founder and CEO of one of these unicorns. Can you explain from your perspective what's going on here? Why has there been this hockey stick rise, as Asha explained?
Yeah, I think we were always amazed by what's going on everywhere else in the world. And I think it's India's time now, to a large extent. And yes, there is a hockey stick. There's no doubt about it that what's happened in the last 1 year is unprecedented compared to anything in the past. But to a large extent, there's lots of factors coming together. And I think each of us sees these factors from our own viewpoint. So while Asha's seeing it as a Silicon Valley investor in terms of Silicon Valley people coming in, me from where I am, I'm seeing it as a homegrown movement where there are lots of local entrepreneurs who've kind of grown up, like Paytm is homegrown. I am homegrown. Zomato's homegrown. None of us have kind of lived or worked in the US ever. And so we all see things from our own perspectives. It's like that elephant in the room that, we are all seeing, somebody's seeing the trunk, somebody's seeing the tail. But hey, it's all about India's time has come. And, these are just signs of a maturing ecosystem where the funding capability is becoming clear. And it's the same thing, right? So all of us, as we get liquidity, what are we going to do next? We are not people like, if you look historically, people used to invest in real estate or, whatever else. That's not what is exciting for us anymore. It's, what's exciting for us is the internet, is SaaS companies, is, technology-based organizations. And so the investment is again going there, and that's where we see the growth, or futuristic organizations. So I think that is what starts to build an ecosystem. And it's not just 5 investors, but it's 500 investors who are coming together. The third thing that we are seeing a lot of, there is a lot of capital in the world, whether it's America or whether it's the US or whether it's the UAE. Yes, the Chinese capital did slow down as far as India is concerned, and India did put up those barriers, etc. But I guess there's so much capital available in the world, and with the lower interest rates, a lot of that is looking for places to flow. It's become a little harder, I believe, to be investing in China. And so there is a rerouting of capital also to some extent. So we see a lot of that is happening as well. But all in all, I guess every country gets a chance. Like, why was it China's chance in the last 15 years? I guess to some extent, India is getting its time in the sun in the next 15 years.
Indeed. Amit, is that your perspective as well, as someone who's obviously brought many of these unicorns to market? Is it the flight of capital from China to India that that explains that growth?
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Claire. So obviously, I worked on Yashish's company's IPO. So obviously, what he's saying in terms of some of these being homegrown talent obviously resonates. I think I can also say that what Asha is saying on some of the other companies we're working on, some of the folks having picked up learnings from the time in the West is also true. But I think Yashish and Asha picked up on a few important bits, right? Which is one, demographics, right? Which other country has more than 1 billion people apart from India and China and is in growth mode? We all know about the clampdown happening in China, and for capital, as Yashish mentioned, you've got a low interest rate environment. Capital is looking for higher returns. Obviously, India becomes a key jurisdiction for those investors looking to diversify away from China, but still looking for high valuations and growth as a very attractive proposition. Together with that, what you're seeing is changing consumer preferences. I talk to my own friends. I left India 20 years ago. I keep doing deals in India, but I physically sort of left living there. And at that time, everyone used to go out and buy groceries and a lot of other goods from physical shops and retailers. We are talking about the vast number of industries which have got, in some ways, transformed by the growth of the internet. And of course, internet-based companies have been a big fillip of this growth in the last year. And the question that came up initially, and Asha said, why has there been this hockey stick? I think it is because, with the lockdown, a lot of the habits of consumers very quickly changed. Zomato as an example, from going out to restaurants to ordering online. And therefore you started getting these high valuations because of the environment we were in. So I do also think that it is not restricted to just 1 year. Look, some of it may be, I wouldn't say a bubble, but some of the valuations for some companies may be higher, but a lot of them across various industries, Yashish's company, for example, have actually built sustainable business models. And while, maybe the number of unicorns by definition are supposed to be a small number of players, the rare animal is a unicorn. It may indicate that, going forward, maybe we'll see a fewer number of them, but I think India is going to propel a number of unicorns coming to the fore because of these various elements at play.
Okay, Amit, thank you. Asha, I'll come back to you because I know that you're slightly pushed for time. So you're an investor with roots in India, but based in the US. Are lots of US investors now looking to India, thinking this is the growth market?
Yes, many of us are looking. In fact, I've been investing in the Indian market for the last about 4 to 5 years now. But I think I'll probably start accelerating my investments here simply because this is the time when the market has matured. The companies that I'm seeing are already quite global in their reach and in their thinking. 2 or 3 of the companies that I am already invested in, they have actually started out by selling their products in the US market. So they are not selling in India at all. They are actually going straight to United States and selling there. This is something unprecedented. I've never seen this before, which actually kind of just tells me that there is an increased amount of confidence in Indian entrepreneurs to feel comfortable going and selling in US first before going to the Indian market or going to the Asian market in general. So because of these kind of unprecedented developments, it's also easy for us in US investors to have those companies in our backyard. It's easier for us for due diligence, taking board seats, and be able to make connections for them into the global market there.
And can we just ask about the nuts and bolts, how it all works? Do companies come and pitch to you? Do you identify them? And if they pitch to you, how many pitches are you getting a day? Are you completely inundated?
Well, now that I've been in venture capital, right, for about 20, 25 years now, for me, the pipeline, so to speak, of deal flow is fairly narrow in the sense that I try to, meet companies that are my own people that I've known from my own network. So often, some, as just like other venture capitalists who are, restricted on bandwidth, I don't meet companies completely out of the blue. It's often through referrals or people that I've already invested in before. Many of my entrepreneurs are repeat entrepreneurs. They're on to their 3rd or 4th company. And that it's a shortcut to due diligence. And so that's what we are doing now, that it's just easy for us to invest, and especially knowing that they're starting out with the US market. It's easy access to these entrepreneurs. But yeah, I think that's
What kind of companies are you looking at? Are they all tech companies, for instance?
They are only tech companies.
Only.
My investment portfolio is strictly in tech, but I am looking at a little bit of biotech, looking a little bit of health sciences with computation. I'm looking at one company right now, which is in quantum computing. It's actually a spin-off from Google. So that's something that I'm super excited about. And I have 2 or 3 EV companies and one self-driving electric vehicle company that I just invested in. So that's where I am right now.
Okay, fabulous. Asha, thank you very much. If we can come back to Yashish, perhaps. Just tell us a little bit more about PB Fintech. We have skirted over it somewhat. I mean, your company went to market towards the end of last year. It's valued at over $5.8 billion. How did you get to this point, basically? How did you spot the opportunity? How did you grow so quickly?
So thanks. I can't speak too much about valuations, etc. And quite honestly, it doesn't excite me either. So in fact, I've always mentioned that I'm quite embarrassed by being even called a unicorn. Because to an extent that talks about how easy it is to become a unicorn in India today. How do I put it? It's like giving an Olympic athlete a medal for a national level game or something of that sort. So I guess that's where I am in my mindset. I think policies are solving the fundamental problem of risk for consumers, health insurance, life insurance, which is a big social problem in India for the middle class. We've identified that, we've educated the consumer on that and the consumers, but I won't hog too much of your time on Policy Bazaar. What I'd say is, I think what we did quite well is we were quite focused. See, to build a lasting organization, it cannot be just financial. You have to be a mix of financial and missionary. And I guess that mission is very, very critical. And the mission was that, look, there's a huge middle class, and having somewhat lived in the UK and being an army officer's son, I knew that there were certain services like health insurance and life insurance, which are taken for granted. In the UK, we have the NHS, and the army in India has the healthcare. And so we take it for granted. But as people get older, who pays for their illness, right? When they're not working, there's a lot of those people in India, a lot of people in the middle class. And how much, there was a saying at one point that a lot of middle class Indians spend 80% of their total wealth in the last 80 days of their life, right? And I don't know for what percentage that's a reality, but that is a pretty stark reality out there, right? And it's something it's almost difficult to grapple with. So I guess that's the problem we're trying to solve, to make sure nobody falls into that situation where they don't finish off all their wealth in the last few days in a hospital or anything else. And I guess as long as we are focused on that, yes, we'll find a way to make money also. We'll keep evolving every year. Every year we become stronger as an organization, and we'll keep evolving. I think it's a good time to be in the Indian market and the stage we're at, because yes, I do believe there is a bit of frenzy in building unicorns, and I think people are getting carried away with that. In fact, I meet investors who are like, I wish I could invest in this company at a higher valuation so I can make my investing company a unicorn. So I've in the back doors, I've seen those conversations as well. I guess those are just signs of the times, which is the low interest rate environment, the amount of capital available, etc. But I do believe there's a lot of innovation happening in India at a core level. And for founders who want to build lasting organizations, they have to focus on the mission aspect rather than just the monetary aspect. I think getting excited by these valuations can disappear in a moment. I've seen times where valuations drop by 10x in almost no time. And I guess we might be in one of the upswings, we might be in the downswings. You can't really tell where we are. It's very difficult to tell where you are. If people knew that, that would be a jackpot, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, you said in previous interviews that you have a builder's rather than a trader's mentality. I suppose that's what you mean by not being too obsessed with the valuation and focusing simply on building up your business and having that mission.
Yeah, the valuation will follow. See, India is a market where I do believe if you have a good story, good business, and you have a good story, and you can explain it well to your investors, you will get valued rightly. Because a lot of very intelligent investors are focused on India, and they are willing to engage and understand your business. If I look at our own business, it's quite a complicated business when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it. But there are investors willing to engage and willing to understand it. I wouldn't say it's a retail business per se, because I think it's very difficult for retailers to really understand, in depth what we are building. But for institutional investors, they do, manage to do that quite well. And all I'm trying to say is there's lots of institutional investors. Like if you were in a smaller country or a little more neglected country, I would say, then maybe you won't get the same level of institutional focus. But in India, you get that institutional focus. So you don't have to worry about valuation if you're building a solid business. And that's my point in trying to say, let's not get carried away by what your instantaneous valuation is. I guess it's more important to build a robust business. And people are willing to look at all metrics and understand how your business will develop.
Okay. Amit, what are your thoughts on that? Do you share those views that, valuation isn't everything?
No, absolutely. And I think that is the whole point. I mean, the reality is, I think Yashish is right. Valuations can disappear. You look at the number of food delivery apps that started and how many of them ultimately survive. The same is going to happen in a lot of the industries. The whole sort of medical industry and the sort of pharma industry, which is going online. A number of people chasing it. The same with the education tech industry. I mean, ultimately, it is about who is, I think well put by Yashish, the builder's mentality. I mean, ultimately, I don't think if you're only chasing valuations, you're going to be a survivor. It's if your business is sustainable, because ultimately, some of these valuations are propped up by, obviously VC money coming in, but how much of that is going to be sustainable in the long run? When you come to doing an IPO, how many investors do you attract who are sort of long-term investors who are not looking to exit and therefore chasing sort of higher sort of multiples, is really the key to building a sustainable business. So I think that's exactly right. And the reality is a lot of it is paper money for now, and ultimately you got to see which ones survive in the long run.
Okay, how many of these, if I'm not being too rude asking this, but how many of them are real innovative companies, and how many are copycats really of, say, food delivery apps that we see here in Europe or the US?
I don't think any of these, sorry if I'm jumping the question in any way, I don't think anybody in India any longer is starting what you would call absolute copycats. So, if you look at the timeline of when Zomato was launched, it was way back in 2008. Food delivery across the world hadn't really caught on then. So yes, it is easy to say that yes, food delivery also exists. But I believe Uber Eats started after that, or Deliveroo also started after Zomato. So you could almost say the reverse is the situation, that maybe they are copying Zomato. But I'm not going that far. So I think, and that's what I was in a way mentioning when Asha was also speaking. I think the strength of the Indian ecosystem in the last 4 or 5 years is that it is homegrown. Remember, nothing like UPI has happened anywhere in the world. Nothing like, yes, we hear in a small country like Estonia, there is something like an NDHM. But now India is building the National Digital Health Mission, which is, so I think these rails being built by the government, whether it is UPI, whether it's Aadhaar, there's nothing like Aadhaar anywhere in the world. Nothing like it. So I think the time has passed when India would say, okay, let's look to the West for examples of what's worked and take it back to India. I genuinely believe, and maybe I'm kind of overstretching the conversation here, but I genuinely believe now it's time for the West to look at India once more after the Vedic period and all that happened. Let's kind of forget about that. But it's time once more to look at India and say, okay, so what exactly is going on in India and how can we replicate this? Like, I'm genuinely telling you, yes, it's my company, but there is nothing like Policy Bazaar anywhere in the world. The money supermarket of the UK, which you could say is an initial inspiration of Policy Bazaar, is a very, very, very meek comparison to Policy Bazaar. It's a very basic operation compared to what is happening there. And to an extent, I think the last 15 years, the world has looked at China in terms of innovation. And I think it would be almost, arrogant of the West to say, hey, look, the Chinese innovation was all copycat. It genuinely wasn't. A lot of the innovation that was happening there was homegrown. And I think the same is largely true of India, largely, by and large. So I think quite genuinely copycat applications almost have no space. They will come and they will flounder within a very short span of time. Because India is a very heterogeneous market. It's a very large country with lots of inequalities, social, demographic, etc., etc. So I guess you have to be unique in solving those problems. And, India's problems are different from the rest of the world. We do not have a social infrastructure yet. So we are developing the tools and technologies to manage, the services to a large population on the basis of technology. And to an extent, you are seeing a leapfrog generation. if you recollect, I was in India in the late 90s, and we used to struggle to get landline telephone lines. It was very expensive. It used to cost 50,000 rupees to get a telephone line at home. And the mobile phone came and changed everything. Today, everybody's got a smartphone. And nobody is really, if you go to Indian places, most of them don't have a landline. So we totally skipped that generation, right? So India is in that zone where it's probably going to skip some steps. I'll give you one very simple example. India might skip credit cards altogether. Right? If you look at the US, 1.5 billion credit cards with a population of 250 million or 275 million. India has only 50 million credit cards with a population of 1.2 billion. Now, does India need to have 4 billion credit cards to start competing with the US? Maybe not. Maybe we'll skip the generation altogether. So I think there is something unique happening in India, and that confidence is there in the entrepreneurs today that, look, we are building for ourselves, and maybe the world can also learn from us.
So Amit, you did mention the internet obviously as being this sort of probably the precursor to this huge boom. Is this all digital stuff that affects only the entrepreneurs, or does this benefit India more generally, this big boom that we're seeing?
Yeah. No, I think it benefits India more generally. I mean, obviously, you take EdTech, right? I mean, there's in fact some statistics recently by one of the government statistical sort of institutes, which said that the growth in penetration in rural areas is now exceeding that in sort of urban areas. I mean, let me give you an example of how real businesses have been benefited and real consumers have been benefited by the growth of technology and the growth of B2B businesses. So, and I'm sure you all read about it, but one instance of a business is a company in the sort of trucking space, where obviously being able to identify the needs of people with access to commercial vehicles with those who need their supplies to be ferried was initially a very difficult task, because without the internet, you were really prone to using your own network systems and your sort of contact lists. The fact that now you've got a B2B service available, which is internet powered, means that a lot of people now have access to, truckers have access to their customers have access to truckers who will deliver for them in a way that was never possible before the rise of the internet. So what the internet has done has been to, in some ways, reduce the monopoly of those with big pockets, those big business houses, which were able to dominate because they had access to the avenues of power and privilege. What it has done is democratized, in some ways, the growth of a lot of these businesses in India. Some of these are being created by first-generation entrepreneurs, whether it is Yashish at Policy Bazaar, whether it is the guys at Delivery or Farm Easy or various other sort of companies. And what it means is that actually, if you have a good idea, and if you can use the internet to your advantage and be more nimble than some of the bigger, more sort of institutional, but more in some ways traditionally sort of powerful companies with greater access to the corridors of perhaps bureaucracy and others, you will still do extremely well, and because the internet has acted as sort of a way that the competitive playing field has been leveled.
Yeah, democratized it, as you mentioned. But there must be some restraints to that growth. There are issues in India. Are there some things that are holding that growth back? Some inefficiencies in the system? Question to either of you.
So I think any system to change takes time, right? And yes, of course, we have held ourselves back as a country for a pretty long time. There's no doubt about that, right? I think if you went back into the 60s, India was on a GDP basis very comparable to China. And I think we had almost a lost 4 decades, right? And I think but what I can say is there's never been that confidence and that control that entrepreneurs are feeling today. And I have been in the Indian business at least since 1990, late 1990s. That confidence has never been there, where we feel we are part of the change, where we feel we can drive some change. We feel, tomorrow is going to be better than today. And we feel every day more in control than we did previously. Of course, things are taking time to change. There are multiple structures that obstruct growth.
Can I ask what examples you can give? What does obstruct growth? Are we talking?
See, for me as a public company, it's not very nice to speak about a lot of things because it can affect the company and its shareholders, right? So it's very difficult for me to freely speak. But I think those are not secrets to anyone. It is by and large mid to junior level bureaucracy of the country. And I do not say senior level bureaucracy because I don't think that is the challenge. But that holds the country back quite a bit because we have, I know the world may or may not want to speak about this, but India was a colony at one time. And our administrative services systems are built to control a colony. So they have been designed to manage, administer, policy administration. They're very good at that. India is very good at that. So, administering vaccines, but they were not tasked with a development agenda ever. If you know what I mean, because that is not the objective of the colony. The colony's objective is not to become an independent, developed nation on its own. And we never had what you would call a violent revolution in a way like France did or somebody else did or the America did. So there was no system change. Upon independence, the same system pretty much carried on. So the Indian administrative services, the whole infrastructure is from British times. I'll give you an example, right? My dad is in the army. And we used to get a warrant every 2 years to go on holiday, paid holiday, where the government would pay for, our travel, etc. Every 2 years, you get it as part of the army. That was for 1,440 kilometers or miles, I forget. And I used to always wonder why in India do we have 1,440 miles? And it's when I came to the UK that I realized that's the border to border length of the UK. Which was applying for Indian army warrants 50 years after independence, right? So we have, and rules have kept coming amorphously. And so all those rules, one way or the other, block development. They're not oriented. Our Insurance Industry Act is 1932.
Yeah.
Who in 1932 could have predicted something like Policy Bazaar is going to exist? That consumers, it says insurance is a subject matter of desolicitation, which means a customer can never come and ask for insurance. You have to approach a customer to sell insurance. It was never envisaged that customers would walk in and say, I want insurance, right? But that's happening today. So I think some of our rules and the change in those rules needs to be more frequent. And sometimes what you do to do that, suppose I have a house and I have lots of stuff in my house. Sometimes I have to throw everything out to start afresh. And I think every 5 years is not a bad time to relook at all your laws and say which of them are actually relevant. And I think India is a country that perhaps needs that. But what the view we guys are taking is that, look, that's not going to happen. So let's do what we can within the realm of what we have. And I think it started to work.
Okay, Amit, what would you throw out every 5 years?
No, I think that's right. I mean, look, my dad was in the Indian Army too. By the way, we had the same sort of, so I can relate to what Yashish is saying. I think, look, on that, I can say a lot as a lawyer. I mean, the code of civil procedure, the code of criminal procedure, that's all from the British time, right? I mean, nothing's changed. The bureaucracy was built, by the British, for the British, and continues to this day that same shape and form, right? I went to a college in Oxford. I believe Yashish's son goes to the same college, which in some ways produced most of the civil servants of India, bailiff. So, I sort of, I don't disagree that I think a lot needs to change. But what I will say is he touches an important point, which is if you look at why is it that the internet companies have led the fray in sort of the number of unicorns being created, because wherever the government's sort of heavy hand of regulation comes in, it's harder to create a unicorn, right? And it's actually more advantageous for the more established players. So in some ways, the unicorns are finding new businesses where they can come in and help address a need that exists, but no one's thought of it, right? Or people have thought of it, but not implemented that solution well. Actually, when you talked about innovation and you said, are these really copycat? And I agree. I mean, you don't need to create the most eureka idea for it to be a unicorn. A lot of it's an idea that should solve a palpable need, and you need to implement it well, right? So the whole point is in the way you implement it and the way you're able to scale it up. And the point is, what can actually stymie the growth of, I guess, some of the unicorns is as they grow, what regulations come in. And I don't disagree at a sort of higher level. I think, the whole sort of Make in India, Atmanirbhar campaign, all of that is a step in the right direction to empowering, right, the manufacturing sector. The issue then becomes, at what point does regulation start affecting some of the sectors that these unicorns have come into and are as yet sort of somewhat unfettered, and then get sort of buried under the weight of increasing regulation. I think that's what we need to watch out for, and which is a propensity in India.
Amit, well, we've got you as well. Let me just ask about China. Obviously, we talked about the flight of global capital from China benefiting India. Can India ever grow at that phenomenal rate, or is it just impossible? What's your view on that?
I think that's a larger question. Maybe Yashish, as an entrepreneur in India, can answer it. I don't think. Look, India doesn't have a command economy like China does, so it's much easier for China to command growth at a certain level and for growth to happen. But I think the business is being built. But we've also seen what happened to Alibaba, what is happening to Alibaba and various other companies, right? In India, we're looking at the debt defaults that are going on in China at the moment. I think in some ways, India is always, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. I think it'll be a more ponderous growth in India, but I think the growth of the internet has really propelled the growth of the country. And as sort of the Chinese Communist Party takes a look at, what some of the changes of the last, I guess, 10, 20 years have brought, and whether ideologically they want to clamp down on it, may well mean that there may be greater growth or maybe almost as higher growth in China, although I wouldn't bet that we can match the sort of pace of growth that has happened in China, where sort of so many millions were lifted so quickly out of poverty, because we just don't have the command style of economy. We're a rambunctious democracy with a federal system. It's much harder.
Yashish, your views on that?
So I actually don't have any comments on China because I don't understand China very well. But I do know that how India was held back, I would say, to some extent for decades. I think India is coming out of that with confidence. And I can speak about growth rates a little bit. I think the growth rates that India can deliver in the next 10, 15 years can be astounding. And I think they can, to some extent, dwarf what China achieved. And I know I may be standing alone in that. And I'll explain the reason why. See, this is not an economy being built by a government. It is at best being watched by a government, at best being supported by a government. Earlier, I don't want to comment on the past, but that's where the situation is today. It's people, it's organic. None of us were told by the government to start this. None of us were, if anything, we faced hurdles of one sort or the other, which are natural, which I just explained, which I just spoke about. And I think that entrepreneurial zeal that exists in India, I think is unmatched. I've traveled the world. I have traveled the world. The way a child thinks, the way the SME workers think, the way the number of small businesses that exist. And once you have that entrepreneurial zeal and you have the aspirational level and a very young population, it can go two ways. I think India is slowly discovering that jobs is not the way India will go. Large corporates with lots of jobs, desk offices, is perhaps not the route India will be able to take. Because no large corporates are coming in to hire so many, millions of people. Entrepreneurialism is perhaps the route India will take. A policy bazaar created 10,000 jobs. It's creating 1,000+ jobs every year. I think many more such organizations will happen, which will create jobs. And I think entrepreneurialism is the way we will grow. And of course, if you talk to I look at one thing. I talk to my son's classmates in the UK. And I asked them, what is your aspiration? They said, we'd be lucky if we have a job. Many of them say that, right? I speak to the same people, same age in India, and they all want to start the next tech giant. All by now, if that starts to happen, that's going to create a very growth-oriented economy. And I think the fact, and what Amit mentioned, is that yes, they can be command economies, but then they tend to at some point falter. Whereas this won't have, I would compare it to the US in the 1800s. And I think what the US saw, perhaps is similar to what India might see. And I think it'll be a very interesting development.
Okay, just a quick word also, the last couple of years have seen us completely thrown sideways by COVID. I just wonder if, Yashish, you believe that might have actually helped these tech startups in the sense that it's accelerated digital transformation. What's your view on that? Is it
when I look at the data, it hasn't changed that dramatically. Yes, it's helped a little bit. But it is not a dramatic shift. Like, a dramatic shift would be, okay, it's become 10x. That's not happened. The user numbers are perhaps 1.5 times what they were at the beginning of COVID. The order numbers are probably double of what they were, maybe triple. They're not 10x, right? And I think COVID came in bursts. It came in 2-3 bursts. It had deep impact on economy. It had deep impact on the unorganized sector in many ways. Yes, it has helped overall in a relative market share situation. Market share has moved towards digital. There's no doubt about that. And digital has become more important to everybody. And everybody's learned how to function digitally. But I wouldn't go so far as to say, yes, what COVID has done is put a lot of capital in people's pockets with the West doing the quantitative easing. And yes, that would have helped a lot of, Indian businesses achieve high valuations. And globally, tech achieve a lot of valuations because that's where the capital has gone to some extent. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that COVID has probably done what would have happened in 5-6 years has probably happened in 2 years.
Amit, your views as well?
Yeah, no. I look, I don't have the data, right? So about how much of a multiple it's been. I guess it also depends upon the business, right? So certain businesses may have been helped more than some others. But I So I guess it really depends on the business. I think for some, perhaps a food delivery one, I would imagine, right? Again, I have not, I don't have the data in front of me, but I would imagine COVID would have helped in that business a lot. In maybe insurance, it's a separate, it wouldn't maybe have exacerbated the growth by quite that same multiple. Sorry, you had a question there.
Well, my question really is what Yashish mentioned, which was that COVID obviously then led to quantitative easing, which led to more capital, which has in turn led to more investment.
That's right. No, that of course is true. I mean, look, a lot of the, if you look at who are the biggest investors in India, Sequoia, Tiger Global, right, SoftBank, I mean, a lot of them have come in, because, one, there is this sort of some amount of disenchantment with China, given what is happening, and some amount of diversification away from China, right? I mean, I'm seeing that in capital markets, both on the equity and on the debt side, right? We have a number of sort of, bond launches at the moment, and everyone says if you're a non-Chinese company, it's probably good for you at the moment, right? Because you've got investors chasing those returns. Same is true for, for equity. So that is true that some of these have been, funded by sort of venture capitalists looking for greater growth. But this is the key. It does not mean that those businesses are not sustainable. And even if those valuations reduce, I think there are two or three things. I was listening to an interview by Doug Leone, which was quite some time back, and he was comparing India with Brazil. And he was saying that one of the reasons that Sequoia has invested as much in India is because of the people coming out of IIT. I mean, there's an IIT in here, but I'm working on a number of other sort of unicorns, and the sheer number of IITians involved in them is really quite incredible. And he said that if you've got a large number of really talented people with engineering backgrounds, especially in the tech sector, that for them is a real plus for investing. And he said, for whatever reason, Brazil does not have that, and India has that a lot. So it's interesting. India invested a lot in the IITs early on, and maybe it is now the time when some of those folks, Yashish and many of his ilk are, as he says, have that some of them, not every IITian, of course, has that entrepreneurial zeal, but the ones who do, the ones who understand technology, who understand businesses, and non-IITians, of course. India has a very deep sort of business culture, which it has always had. But I think are sort of exacerbating or sort of accelerating the pace of change. So I think, look, the point is, even if some of these valuations come down and people say all of this is a bubble, it's not a bubble. Some of the valuations may be frothy, but what it means is we are seeing the advent of many, many unicorns to be created. Maybe there won't be as many created in 2023 as many will be created in 2022. There may be fewer, but that doesn't mean there will still not be a tremendous number of real businesses being created, and more unicorns will join. And I think what we need to look at is where we will be in 5 years and 10 years. And I think there are very few countries with as much potential as India for the combination of these factors: young population, great demographics, talented founders, and increasing internet access.
Great.
And,
yeah.
and a government which is increasingly proud of entrepreneurs. It's very rare to have that, right? When a government starts batting for unicorns, when a government starts batting, so I think it's a lot of things coming together.
What's your prediction? This is our final question before we wrap up. What is your prediction for the coming few years?
See, if you take a 5-year view, I think digital is going to transform a lot of sectors, and digital will be a far bigger part of the economy than it is today in India. And when I say far bigger part, I can safely say market shares will be at least 2 to 3x of where they are within the next 5 years. So I say digital versus non-digital, because that's the way the young population is moving. That's the way. And I'm talking about 5 years. I'm not talking about 10, 15 years. These kind of changes and when that change happens, See, today, if I look at India, and I'm making a very broad brush statement, I would say roughly 10% of the consumer economy is on the internet. When I say double, triple, I'm talking about 20, 30%. At that stage, please appreciate that starts to mean the death knell for a lot of non-tech businesses. Because for a tech business at 30% kind of scale, for the non-tech businesses, they cannot compete with it anymore, right? It just becomes impossible. You're seeing that in the UK, for example. You're seeing a lot of, because of the Amazon impact, you're seeing a lot of high street guys just moving out. It's no longer viable. So you are going to see that in the next 5 years, because that's where the world is moving. And the tech guys have reached a stage. There's nothing more powerful than a tech company reaching a stage where it's not going to die. There's really nothing more powerful than that, because essentially that's what Amazon is. It's a tech company which will not die. And that just means every year it'll keep growing. Every year it'll keep becoming stronger, almost automatically.
Yeah. And that's
right?
the
And the
plan
profit
for
pools keep
PB.
increasing.
Is that the plan for PB Fintech to sort of
See, I
expand?
cannot, again, I'm in that zone where I cannot talk about Policy Bazaar per se, but I'm talking about the internet per se. And of course, what applies to the internet will apply for Policy Bazaar. There's no doubt about it that the growth over the next 5 years, the market share, see, I can talk about historical. Every 3 years, we double our market share. In which industry does that happen? Where you're doubling your market share every 3 years, right? So I think these numbers start to have a different meaning when you hit 10%. They have a different meaning when you're at 1%. And it can't happen forever, because once you reach 30%, you kind of, where are you going to go? You're going to go to 40, 50, 50, 60, right? But the point is, these start this is the phase when you go from 10 to 30 is the transformation phase for any economy. And I can smoothly predict, like quite certainly predict, that would happen for India over the next 5 years alone. So then these valuations suddenly look cheap. And I guess if somebody misses the bus, they just miss the bus. There's no way to go and invest in an Alibaba after it became a whatever. I'm sure it's possible now, but after it became what it became.
Okay. Your final word, Amit. So these valuations going to look cheap in a few years' time?
I said 5, not a few.
5 years. 5 years.
I did not say 2 years.
Yeah. I think if you look at it, as I have said, this is not a flash in the pan. I certainly don't think so. As we do some of these deals and we look at the businesses that are being created. These are real businesses. They may have been propelled a little bit in terms of coming to IPO because the stock markets have been doing well and because they're getting good valuations. But it doesn't mean that the underlying businesses are not good. Look, there will be some who are still unprofitable and are getting high valuations. There are some who may fizzle out and die. That'll happen too. I'm not saying all of this is unfettered, great and good, right? And everyone will be a survivor. But what I mean is the sheer numbers of businesses today disintermediating the traditional ways of doing business means, and the sheer sort of zest that people now have to try their hands at entrepreneurship. You look at some of these folks, and Asha made, and I disagree that some of the folks are returning from India. A lot of these guys are coming out working for a year at management consultancy in Delhi and saying, we actually want to be entrepreneurs and starting out, right, and building something here. So a lot of these are homegrown, right? Yes, a lot of the capital is coming from the US. That is true, right? But a lot of the ideas, a lot of the talent is homegrown. And that's a perfect meeting point, right? Of homegrown talent and access to capital with what is happening in China. And if, the government policy continues as it shows signs of continuing, then I agree with Yashish. That 5 years from now, I think we'd be talking about, if you have the same talk again, we'd be sort of looking back and saying, maybe we even underestimated the growth that was possible.
Okay, great. Well, I have to say it was an incredibly optimistic conversation. So thank you to you both. And also obviously to Asha, who we had on earlier as well. We're going to wrap it up there. Let me just say thank you both to our panelists and also to our attendees. Thank you for joining us today. Quick plug for Fair Observer. Fair Observer is a platform for citizen journalism with over 2,500 contributors from 90 different countries. So please do get in touch if you'd like to write for us, or if you'd like to follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletter. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Thanks very much again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Claire.
No worries.
Thanks, Yashish. Thanks, everyone.